Good afternoon. Lester Quimby's the name. I'm the sheriff of Hodag Gulch. My wife Letitia is our chief necromancer. I like to make a habit of getting to know everyone who comes through town, to make sure they're going to be a net positive for the community, if you understand my meaning. Now, don't fret none about that. Despite what they might tell you down in Dawood, the people of Hodag Gulch are a welcoming bunch to people no matter their color or creed. We all are in this together out here. Ain't no other place in the United States so full of monsters and troublemakers. No, sir, I ain't interested in the variety of human you are, just whether or not you're going to help me keep other humans safe. Wonkatonkwa County is a place of extraordinary circumstances, and I'm willing to take extraordinary measures to keep the poor innocent folks who've been dragged here safe. And thanks to my lovely wife, that means I won't hesitate to shoot first and ask questions later, if you get my meaning. Now, it probably won't shock you to realize that there are people around here who don't like my brand of enforcing the law. They find making the dead talk distasteful. But just talk to old Jeb here about what that means for him. By breathing what was meant to be temporary life into him, I was able to let him name his murderer, and saw the fella hang for what he did. But where are my manners talking about hanging to new folks? I am given to the understanding that you all gave Deputy Marston a hand when trouble came your way on the stagecoach. I may be harsh with criminals, but I am also very generous with those who help. As a gesture of goodwill for the trouble you solved, I have a small bounty for you. There are always bounties advertised in my office. I recommend you come by and have a look at them. You are very welcome indeed if you're willing to gun down bad men and dangerous monsters. I love me a good bounty hunter. But of course, I'm sure I've taken up enough of your time. Y'all have a good day now. Here? Welcome, partner, to Dead Man's Dice, a chronicle of the first campaign run in my own Undeadwood Weird West RPG, as well as a bit of a development log for the game. Here I'm going to tell you about the events of the campaign, tell you about the game and the setting, share some lore and some ideas with you, and hopefully bring my own bizarre fantasy world of Wonkatonkwa County to life. I'm Brian Rideout, host, author of Undeadwood, and the Soul Wrangler for this here campaign. Keep your gun handy, pray over your ammunition, and let's slap some leather. This here's episode 2, The Story So Far, part 1. Our first session of play took place on September the 9th, 2024 in the evening, over an hour and a half. In our last episode, we met 4 lost souls, suddenly banished to Wonkatonkwa County. We have Matt, a mountain man, tracker, and fur trader, turned sharpshooter for the Union Army. He doesn't remember what happened shortly after he turned home to return to his kin after his long absence for the war. Then we have Patrick, a recent immigrant from Ireland, here to take advantage of the new opportunities that America's expansion west has to offer. Already a skilled gunslinger, capable of amazing feats of theatrical gunplay. And Shane, another recent immigrant from Ireland, an ordained female priest who's been troubled her whole life by dark visions and strange occurrences. She mixes her incredible piety with dabbling in the occult arts, trying to get an understanding of what it is she has faced her whole life. And May, a trained doctor turned snake oil salesman because she finds selling false cures far easier and less stressful than creating real ones. Capable as both a surgeon and a con artist, May has studied a number of Native American cultures, both to learn their naturopathic cures and a touch of their shamanism, both with the aim to give her custom elixirs an air of credibility. These four strangers woke up together in the passenger car of the number 9, a haunted train that passes through Wonkatonkwa County. It travels from east to west, coming out of a tunnel that, when the train isn't there, appears to be caved in. It crosses a single bridge to the heart of the county, and there it spills people out on the beautiful, timeless, but strangely alien train station. As they step out onto the platform and begin to break the spell that has left them silent and groggy, they're approached by Deputy Marston and the talking skull of Jeb Sorza. The skull informs them that he's standing in for Sheriff Lester Quimby, the sheriff of a nearby town called Hodag Gulch, some 30 miles to the north. Normally, Sheriff Quimby would have greeted them himself, but the Wahpeton gang, usually troublemakers from the north end of the county, had attacked a ranch to the north of Hodag Gulch, and he needed to see to the trouble personally before that gang decided Hodag Gulch was an easier target. The skull informed them that he was once a murder victim, that the sheriff's wife, a necromancer by the name of Letitia Quimby, had cast a spell to let his skull speak and name his killer, but unlike most people, once his skull was given the ability to talk, it never shut up, much like he had been in life. The undead skull had become something of a spokesperson for the town. He keeps up on the local gossip, makes introductions to people, and normally does daily readings of the newspaper to illiterate people in the local saloon. A skull with a gift for gab, a talent for organizing information, and a gift for faces makes the perfect greeter, and gives newcomers our first taste of the strange and paranormal events that go on in Wonkatonkwa County. Of course, they couldn't stay near the train station. At night, the ghost town they sat in, Wonkatonkwa Station, was dangerously literal. The dead who had been consumed by the desert, called the Dead Fellas, will stalk every part of the ghost town at night where they can't see the hex mark that protects the train station. And if they catch someone, they will drain their vital essence, allowing them to feel alive and energetic, at least long enough to do something horrible to the people who had been kind enough to give them their life essence to begin with. Unfortunately, the stagecoach that had been brought down for them threw a wheel, and so they were faced with a choice. Find a place to hole up for the night, and with the help of the skull, hopefully ward off the evil dead who would doubtless show in a few hours, and hope that the stagecoach could repair itself, or set out into the desert and camp in the stagecoach, which might be slightly safer, or perhaps trust to luck that the coach can be repaired in time. Deputy Marston, a pale and nervous man who didn't like to speak after the horrors he has seen, was perfectly happy to protect them if they wanted to do the walking. Concerned that they would have a long walk, Patrick went over to the nearby well to fill his water skin. Jeb immediately shouted for him to stop and gave him a warning. The well at Wonkatonkwa Station was home to some otherworldly being, and the chemical it sweat from its skin, the matmos, gave people extraordinary abilities, but also would slowly drive them mad and make them violent. Only the crazed and desperate drank from that well. Intrigued, Patrick slammed down the contents of a canteen Deputy Marston had brought, and then filled it from the well, deftly evading Matt's attempts to knock it from his hands. Unnatural strength and strange powers could be a very useful thing, he argued, if they ran into trouble in the desert. During their walk along the road from Wonkatonkwa Station to Hodag Gulch, Matt started asking questions. How often were gangs a problem around here? How badly damaged was the stagecoach? Was this kind of problem regular? He didn't like the answers, and worried that this sounded like a setup. Matt stopped regularly any time he came to a series of hills, and looked for tracks. He was not disappointed when he found the tracks of several horses had crossed the path in and out of the desert nearby several times, reminding him of the tracks left by scouting parties who were trying to find the best place to cause trouble on the road. Expecting an ambush, he used the scope on his rifle to scour nearby hills. Anytime they got close to a place that he would have used as an ambush point back during the war. Which meant they were not surprised when a group of bandits attacked them from a nearby gulch. In fact, one of the 6 raiders that rode down from the hills towards them was dead before they even got into pistol range. Between Matt's careful and deadly shots, Patrick's dead-eye aim, 3 of the men lay dead before they got anywhere close. While May and Patrick worked together to set a dynamite charge halfway between them and the attackers, with May prepared with a shotgun to blast the dynamite the moment they got close. Shane, in the meantime, went into a trance, trying to call the spirits of the dead in the desert to see if she might be able to conjure and control them. What she called was a frightening demonic entity, blending features of man, armadillo, and rattlesnake. An embodiment of the hungry desert. While it was fully visible only to her, it caused the horses to panic and stop, preventing the riders from getting much closer. Shane asked it if it could help them in the battle. It terrorized the horses, causing them to throw the men, who then found themselves pinned to the ground as weeds, grasses, and cacti grabbed them. Patrick and Matt closed with their fallen foes, planning on putting them down while they were still tangled up, only to find the desert soil swallowing the dead men alive. The spirit departed, leaving a chill in the air. Aside from claiming the weapons and money on the bandits, they decided to backtrack them, as obviously they had taken time to set up this ambush. They found a campsite about a mile away, which included additional weapons, supplies, magical smudges for warding their campsite, a mule wagon with a team of 3 filled with sets of manacles, and a book written in code that included several small maps, images of strange Mesoamerican art, and bizarre occult notation. They claimed the mounts and the wagon, and brought them down to the road, allowing them a more comfortable journey to where they found the stagecoach was nearly repaired. Rather than risk camping even with the magical smudges, they decided to push on towards Hodag Gulch. The last few minutes of their ride were harrowing, as the sun was going down, and the phantasmal figures known as the Dead Fellas were beginning to burrow up out of the earth. As they approached the ravine in which the town was built, they found themselves being crowded in at all sides by the dead, but thankfully managed to reach a point where the creatures could not follow nor touch them, created by a magical hex mark painted on the back of an old stone building at the edge of Hodag Gulch. Exhausted, the 4 were guided by Marston and the head of Jeb Sorza to the Jabbering Skull Saloon and Hotel, where their hostess, a Cajun lady by the name of Lulu, offered them complimentary rooms until they could be greeted by the sheriff in the morning. Thus ended our first session. Our second session, played for about an hour and a half on the evening of September 16th, 2024, was an action-light and role-playing heavy event. For the 3rd morning in a row since their hell ride, the Lost Souls convened in the bar room of the Jabbering Skull to share breakfast. They all got the feeling variously that their fates, or at least their survival, had become intertwined since they had arrived in Wonkatonkwa County. They learned that there was no known way of leaving the county, except the perilous 200-mile trail up through the Painted Canyon, a trip from which only one man has ever returned. They also learned that the mails still came, that this place was still under the laws of the United States, or at least the local lawmen tried to make it so. But like Texas itself, which it claimed to be a part of, it could be a wild and lawless place. They had sold the guns that they did not want, but decided to hang on to the mule cart, and gathered a number of rumors about what was going on in the county that might provide them with opportunities to build the nest eggs so they could settle down. During the morning's discussion, they were greeted by Sheriff Lester Quimby, a man of 6'3" with steely eyes and an intimidating disposition, although when he wanted to, he could turn on the southern charm quite thickly. Quimby apologized for not being there to meet them, especially with the conspiracy that clearly had set them up to be taken prisoner. He gave them the bounty for the outlaws they had killed, at least the ones whose bodies could be recovered and identified, putting another $120 into the pot. Quimby was friendly when he talked about the possibility of them helping out around the town. He mentioned that he always had bounties available, and that there was mercenary work for people with their obvious talent for combat, and that if Shane really wanted to learn some magic, she should meet with Mrs. Quimby, who had a parlor and store of occult goods at the edge of town. Of course, the sheriff made sure that they clearly understood that he was quick to shoot anyone who caused trouble in town, and that subtle crimes rarely got past him because he was more than willing to make the dead talk if he had to catch a criminal in the act. He had very little of value to say about the Wahpeton gang, as they were usually more trouble up near Vulture Rock, a community at the edge of the Painted Canyon. He did tell them that if they intended to hunt down the dead fellas, which were easy bounties, they would need either holy blessed bullets or bullets made of silver, but that recently both options had become quite expensive, as the largest silver mine in the area, the Hoopsnake Mine, had become haunted. Intrigued, the player characters asked him for details, and he suggested they talk to James Donovan, the mine's foreman, when he let him out of the drunk tank later that morning. Taking the sheriff's advice, they visited Mrs. Quimby, hit the general store, where they were able to put together a stocked medical bag for May, and then interviewed Mr. Donovan. Donovan was an affable good old boy who was trying desperately to keep the miners from his boss's mine from going berserk while they waited for work to resume. May especially turned on the charm and made Mr. Donovan keen to introduce them to Miles Vanderhollis, the owner of the Hoopsnake Mine. After making arrangements at the livery for their horses and their wagon to be cared for, they headed out to the Vanderhollis Ranch in Thunder Valley, where they got to see firsthand herds of Texas Longhorn cattle being ranched alongside the massive scaly Hodags, horned dinosaur-like creatures native to Hodag Gulch, that their fellow exiles had recently domesticated for meat and hide. Being cagey and clever, the party decided that the $600 reward for clearing the mine that Vanderhollis was offering was the ultimate lowball. A mine that isn't working isn't worth anything, and so they offered to clear the mine for Vanderhollis, and in return they each wanted a 15% stake in the mine and its profits. Unfortunately, the NPC reaction rules for Vanderhollis took a nasty turn when they made the proposal. He was insulted and asked them to leave him be. Although, being a proper Texas gentleman, he at least offered them a night's stay at his ranch. This ended our second session of play. Our third play session took place on September 23rd in the evening for about an hour and a half. Trying to build goodwill with Vanderhollis, May decided to stay behind and give the cowhands and the cattle free checkups. While Shane studied the protective hex marks about the ranch, she found the one that was supposed to drive off chupacabras was flawed, and repainted it herself. Interested in finding out what the Wahpeton gang had in store for them, they studied the maps in the encoded book, and figured out where 5 points of interest depicted in the book were located. Leaving May to continue her work, they headed north into the Perdition Desert. Following the map, they found an apparently abandoned ranch with 2 small adobe buildings, slowly decaying in the lee of a nearby hill. Figuring this for a potentially dangerous bandit hideout, Shane and Patrick hung back, letting Matt reconnoiter the area. Heading up the hill, Matt encountered a sniper watching over the valley and wearing the colors of the Wahpeton gang. The sniper only detected him when they were a few yards apart, and the two engaged in a deadly game of cat and mouse on the hillside, stalking each other through the underbrush until Matt got the upper hand, attacked the sniper, and slit his throat with a Bowie knife. The buffalo rifle the sniper had been wielding was such a powerful weapon that Matt considered it providence that he hadn't been shot by it, as he took the sniper's place on the hill. Once they'd given Matt sufficient lead time, Shane and Patrick headed up to the ruins. Shane headed off to one side where she could meditate and possibly call another spirit if one was needed. Patrick approached the ranch carefully, trying to look like a lost wanderer. In time, a woman came out with half a shaven head, grubby clothes, and odd tattoos, slinging a shotgun across her shoulders. As the strange woman and Patrick exchanged pleasantries, Matt watched from above as 2 more men bearing rifles came out of the cellar, leading a creature that looked like a dog-sized vampire bat on a chain in front of them. He had no way to signal Patrick, but mercifully Patrick managed to spot at least the shadow of one of the men hiding behind the building. It became clear after a few moments of exchanging pleasantries that Patrick didn't believe that this woman was anything other than a bandit, and the woman didn't believe Patrick was anything other than trouble. and at the same time they decided they were going to pull their weapons on one another, allowing us to test the potentially lethal quick-draw combat rules. Patrick was faster than the shotgun lady and put one between her eyes while narrowly avoiding being blasted himself. The moment the other two bandits came around the corner, one of them lost their head to the shiny, new-to-him buffalo rifle Matt had claimed from the other sniper. The other bandit let go of the chupacabra, the bat-like monster he'd been holding on a chain, and it rushed at Patrick. The creature took at least one bullet from the revolver before the sharp rifle that Matt had carried up the hill finished it off. Noting the wicked fangs and the dribbling venom, they both were very grateful for each other. The last bandit surrendered, and Matt forced a confession out of him at gunpoint, making him admit that they had intended to take the newcomers as slaves. Being strongly anti-slavery and an angry and wrathful man, Matt executed the prisoner. When they went inside, they found a fourth bandit cowering behind an overturned table, who surrendered immediately. This new prisoner proved to be incredibly cooperative after having seen what Matt did to his compatriot. Their prisoner, it turned out, was an antiquarian who had been kidnapped by the Wahpeton gang some time ago and put to work overseeing an historical dig site they had established. Below them in the sand was a Mesoamerican ruin dedicated to the worship of strange alien gods that had been sealed away and buried beneath Wonkatonkwa eons ago. Creatures for which he used a Navajo word, the Anaya. The Wahpeton gang apparently had managed to find at least one place where such a creature was buried, and were studying it for the incredible magical powers it could yield. The dig site beneath the shack was an ancient pyramid, a place where some forgotten civilization once worshipped, or at least controlled the Anaya through their magic. And the Wahpeton gang wanted what that group had known. Down below they had several people enslaved, working as diggers and kept in line by the brutality of the bandits, along with a pair of tamed chupacabras. Not wanting to face another one of the beasts up close, the party pulled up the floorboards and dropped some food down into a hole. When the other domesticated chupacabra came running for the food, they shot it from above with a shotgun, then went down into the pit, where they found captives in a cage, slowly being mutated by the corrupting influence of the place. They set the prisoners free, and reclaimed a number of soul bottles the witch Patrick had shot had created, holding the trapped spirits of previous slaves. Before they left, they rigged up several traps with dynamite to the entrance, so that the next time the Wahpeton gang decided to check on their dig site, they would lose a few people and bury the entrance. They took the last bandit prisoner, hoping that the sheriff would keep him alive long enough to answer their questions, and bringing back something to identify the other bandits they had bagged along the way. They took the prisoner and the slaves back to town, telling the slaves to consult with Mrs. Quimby to see if they couldn't be cleansed of the strange, toxic effects of the cursed place, before finally turning in the bandit and telling the sheriff what they knew. This was the end of our third play session. I will get us up to date on the fourth and fifth in the next episode. In the meantime, thank you for listening to Dead Man's Dice.
Alright, folks, that's it. Time to move along. What, you want to hear a few things? Well, let old Jeb inform you. This here was narrated by Brian C. Rideout. It is about his role-playing game, Undeadwood, the Weird West RPG. It's narrated by him, and the music was all created using the Suno AI by him. The sound effects have all been downloaded from pixabay.com. And all the sound mastering, editing, and that handy stuff was done by Stormhead Productions. If you really need to hear more, use that there Twitter contraption to contact @BrianRideout7 or email lonesome.cowboy.brian@stormheadproductions.ca. That's it. Thanks a lot. And until next time, don't squat with your spurs on. Slave taken? Personally, I think shooting was too good for the fella. They had a perfectly good mule cart to drag him behind. They could always interrogate him later. I could use the company.